Okie dokie, we'll go ahead and get started. A lot of people are on Zoom today. It sounds like something's already starting to go around, so just take care of yourselves. If you do get sick, please feel free to use the Zoom. Everybody that's been writing in and telling me they're gonna use the Zoom, I've done. Thank you for taking care of yourself and your classmates, so very much appreciate it. Wanted to do a couple things. Oh, help if I turn on the projector. I want to do a couple things. Before we dive in to our discussion and lecture today. So, I did get to grading your exams and I posted the grades on Blackboard. I have one more coming in. So I'm gonna wait until I grade that one and then I hopefully will be able to pass them back on Friday. But once the projector wakes up, I will show y'all, if you're not familiar, since I know a bunch of you are first years, how you actually look at your grades. And then we will also look at some stuff from the news that's really relevant to what we've been talking about. So I'm in the like student preview mode. So this is what you should see when you log in. And so when you go and look on the left-hand side, there's a thing called My Grades. I won't have any grades because I'm not actually doing the work right. But this is where it will post everything, including your exam scores. So exam 1 should be there and other things as well. Now I did get with someone from Connect to see if I could get rid of the ghost assignments, and we cannot. So, you know, we will just roll with it and go from there, and you know what, we'll make the best of it. So, ignore the ones that were due in 2022. Basically, it's what he told me to do and what I can tell y'all to do. The other thing someone just asked me on Zoom, which was a good question, is whether you can access the lecture notes outside of class. Absolutely. If you just click on this link here, you will see not only PDFs and PowerPoints for each, but a direct link to the Google Slides that I'm using in class, because those will have the most up-to-date information if I'm like editing typos or things like that during class. Let me see. I think that's about it for walkthrough. Just a reminder that this is how you get to your Connect assignments. A lot of you have been doing a great job on those. If you haven't started those, highly recommend you start them, because they shouldn't be too overwhelming if you do them every week, but if you try to do them all at once, you will feel completely overwhelmed. To make sure you're doing that, and then just a reminder to be doing your Explain It to the Media quizzes as well. There's one for every chapter. You can do them at any time throughout the semester. They're really good studying for the exam because, as those of you who had been doing them saw, on the exam I actually pull questions from this and I put them in your exam. So nice way to study. And then the other thing, hopefully soon we'll have a couple psychological studies up, and then you'll be able to get psychology experience credits that way. As soon as those are rolling, I will let you all know about it. Any questions about navigating Blackboard, assignments, anything like that? And after I pass your exams back, if anyone does have individual questions about them, please feel free to set up a meeting or just come to see me before or after class. Yeah, so let me exit my preview and then go over to, unfortunately, sex ed is really relevant in the news right now. And why I say unfortunately is because, you know, we all talked and agreed, right, that it's really important to be actually teaching sex ed, right? And you all talked about how important you thought it was. Well, unfortunately, in some cases, that's not happening. So I want to show you a couple things. The first one is maybe the most relevant here, which is that this is within the last week. Officials in Florida basically said, You can teach sex ed, but you can't talk about any type of contraception. And you can't talk about consent. Right? Mind-boggling a little bit for me. So they want them to use abstinence-focused lessons, and they have labeled certain instruction on contraception anatomy and consent as inappropriate for students. The anatomy one really gets me. Like, these students are probably like dissecting stuff, right? Like, I don't know about y'all, but when I was in, I want to say like 9th grade, we dissected fetal pigs, right? And the idea that like you can't learn about anatomy when you're doing that is a little mind-boggling. Advocates are concerned that young people won't reliably be taught about adolescent safe sex or relationship violence at a time when sexual transmissions have been on the rise. Let's see, they have to sign off, the Department of Education has to sign off on each school district's curriculum if they're not using the state's designated sex ed textbook. And so at least a dozen school districts have been told they have to change theirs. And you know, educators, maybe not surprisingly, are pretty upset about it. A spokesperson for the Florida Department of Education defended the state's approach, highlighting the importance of abstinence and recent changes to state law that requires schools to teach that reproductive roles are binary, stable, and unchangeable. I mean, that's just, sorry, just like as someone who knows way too much about biology and gender, as you saw on my first day we talked about this, like, that's just not even true for individual people, right? Like, your reproductive capability changes depending on like your stress levels. Anywho, so this is going on in Florida, right? Not great. And then I also thought this was really interesting. This just came out yesterday, and this is a BuzzFeed article about the types of things people learn in these types of programs that Florida wants to be implementing. Learning that sex isn't for women and women don't like it, but we're lightning rods of sexual temptations for men. I mean, this is insulting to all genders, right? This is really horrifying. Someone told them you could get pregnant from a blowjob. Okay, right? Not what I thought. And this was at a public school. They gave us each a fun-size Snicker bar and said if we brought it back the next day, we got a second. The idea was that if you hold off on sex, the reward would be twice as great. One of my classmates brought a bag of fun-size Snickers and passed them out to the class, so we each had 3 or 4 before class began. You had to have to love each other for babies to be made. Someone said that the clitoris served no purpose. What? No. Tampons will destroy your innocence and purity and you're no longer a virgin. Not true. Also, the whole concept of virginity is socially constructed. It's not actually a thing. A lot of times when women have sex for the first time, or people with hymens, I guess I should say, because not even every girl or woman has a hymen. Like, their hymen stays intact. It doesn't break. Basically, if it breaks, sometimes you're doing stuff wrong. They are giving incorrect information about AIDS. The head of the middle school told them there was a single safe day each month to have sex. It had to do with the lifespan of a sperm. They demonstrated by how condoms worked by pulling out a huge fishing net with the widest weave possible, then dropped ping pong balls through it. That is not true, right? I mean, unless you poke holes in a condom, that's not what's gonna happen. Someone learned that every time you have sex, you get pregnant. And then if you have a period, it's a miscarriage. Nope. Sperm seeks out the vagina from wherever it is, leg, butt, toilet seat, washcloth, it didn't matter. Wow. Some people weren't taught anything. And this person unfortunately says, shockingly, I got pregnant at 17. If you masturbate too much, you'll grow hair on your hand. I've literally never heard that one before. Okay. No one told them STIs could be treated. Yeah, I mean, it's not great to get an STI, but the vast majority of them can be treated, right? Some with antibiotics, even things like HIV can be treated right now with antiretrovirals. So y'all are too young to remember this, but it was a big deal when the basketball player Magic Johnson got diagnosed with HIV, and everyone's like, oh, he's gonna die in like 2 years, but he's still alive because A, he's rich and can always access the best medical care, but B, our treatments are actually really good now for HIV. That if basically if you get wet while you're kissing someone, you're not a virgin. God is watching you masturbate. That just sounds creepy. Conception happens when mom and dad hug each other very tightly. I don't know. If I was a kid and someone told me that, I would like never hug anybody again. I don't know. You are a perfect piece of paper. When you have sex before marriage, the paper gets crumbled and you can never be perfect again. I've heard this with like gum too. Some sex ed teachers will say, like, if you chew up a piece of gum, you can never make it perfect again. That's you if you have sex before marriage. She said that every time you have sex with someone, you leave a part of yourself behind. There are people, like full-grown adult people, who believe this. I don't know if people have heard these crazy conspiracy theories that people are like, well, if you have sex with someone and you have a uterus and they put sperm in your uterus, it just hangs around. It can like affect future children. Sperm only live like max 5 days and then they're sort of like processed by the body. Yeah, don't listen to people who don't know science. One time a teacher laid a blanket on the ground and got a boy and a girl to sit on it. It was supposed to be their wedding night, the first time they had sex with each other. Then she got some other random students to sit on the blanket to represent the people they had sex with before they got married. It was supposed to show that the sacred marriage bed was now crowded. It just made everyone uncomfortable because we were 11. That for the girls, if you have sex with someone you are in love with, it'll hurt. I mean, there are reasons sex will hurt, but they're often biological, right? And then even once you're married, you should remain chaste unless you're trying to conceive. And you'll go to hell if you have sex outside of marriage, get an STI, which will kill you. So you'll go to hell and you'll become pregnant or impregnate your partner. They did not explain what would happen in same-sex pairing. That's actually pretty common, even in pretty comprehensive sex ed. One kid thought that if two girls kissed, one of them would turn into a dude and the other would get pregnant. Magic. It's not a thing, right? Like we all know that's not a thing, hopefully. But again, these are things that people are being taught now, and still in this day and age. The next thing I wanted to show you, which I thought was really interesting, is this is a local news channel, and they're doing and this just started yesterday, a sex ed month. So we're not necessarily going to watch this whole video, but I just wanted to show you that, you know, there are some news outlets that are actually trying to educate their viewers.
With Riverside, you have a lot more resources. You just feel more supported by the health system in general.
Sorry, I could not.
Today marks the kickoff of Let's Talk Month, and while it can be difficult having the talk with your teens, it's essential in building an atmosphere of trust and security. So Lauren Rogers, she's a certified holistic sexuality educator and joins us now with some advice. Welcome, great to have you.
It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, so let's talk about Let's Talk Month. You know, this is the time to sit down and really have this conversation, which is so awkward and weird and hard.
So awkward and weird and hard, and I am so thankful to Advocates for Youth for dedicating an entire month to this topic, right? I want to normalize for every viewer today that having talks with our children about sexuality and bodies and the bodies of others is awkward and hard.
Yeah.
And there are resources like the ones we're going to talk about today. There are helpers. There are educational tools for you. You are not alone in this awkward and hard thing. And today is the kickoff of Let's Talk Month.
So why is it important that we have this talk with our teens?
You know, obviously I come on here and discuss this all the time, but what research continually shows is that warm communication with the children in our lives about sexuality related topics leads to healthier young people and higher achievement rates and higher understandings of themselves and better self-esteem.
Yeah,
consistently.
That's what we want. That's what we want. So let's talk about some characteristics of parents with, you call it sexually healthy adolescents. That does not mean that we're advocating for them to be sexually active. Just quite the contrary.
Quite the contrary. And you know what? This was not on any of my slides, but I was listening to a podcast on the way over here today. And I want to introduce this concept that when we think about age appropriate and developmentally appropriate math skills for a child, we know that we would not be teaching our first grader calculus.
Right.
We wouldn't.
No.
But we do know that in order for our child to take calculus or algebra or geometry in high school, there are fundamental things that our child needs to know. I would encourage every parent.
Like anatomy. Sorry, I'm still like not over that anatomy thing. So again, I think this is really great. I was trying to look up where the station is. It looks like they might be in Roanoke, but I'm not sure. But again, I just think this is really cool that they're going to dedicate a whole month to talking about this, because again, as we've talked about, this is not something a lot of people talk about. As they just said, a lot of people feel uncomfortable or awkward, mostly because our culture makes it uncomfortable and awkward to talk about sex, right? And so I think that that's really interesting and good that people are starting to step in and educate. Alrighty, so we have a couple more discussion questions today, and again, very relevant because they're going to be mostly about sort of sex ed related topics. So again, kind of group yourself with folks, and in a sec, folks on Zoom, I'll throw you in breakout rooms again so you can chat. But this is not true of everyone, obviously, but some college students will engage in risky sexual behavior for a variety of reasons. And so with your group, to sort of chat about, why do you think people do this? So risky sexual behavior would be without the use of a condom or contraceptives, things along those lines. So again, we'll do like 2 minutes to just chat about this, and then we'll chat about it together. All right, and Zoom folks, you're going into breakout rooms. For folks who are, feel free to get up and move around if you need to. Yeah, I was just like, wait, that's not helpful. So there you go. Better? Now you can actually see the question. And you can even make this, what do you think are the main reasons, right? Because it's probably not just one. All right, so it sounds like folks are pretty set on this one already since folks are quiet. So I'm going to bring back our Zoom folks. They should pop back in about 10 seconds, and then we can talk about it together. Alrighty. So Zoom folks in class kind of finished it pretty quickly, so that's why I brought y'all back. So what are some of the reasons that you think people do this? You know,
say somebody they might see somebody else like that. And they may be like, oh, you don't hurt, and they kind of like that at higher risk of getting.
yeah, so social pressure, maybe false information, right, from your friends. Yeah, what are other reasons? And folks on Zoom, feel free to type stuff in the chat as well. Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. The whole idea of like, I'm ready right now, so we can't stop. But also, if we're thinking about like contraceptives, like it's typically something the woman has to take, and it messes with her hormones, right? We know that it does. Really interesting factoid. So the pill was developed in the 60s, and unfortunately, research practices weren't as ethical back then. And they just didn't tell the women they were testing it on. It was often very poor women. They paid them for their participation. I think they exploited women in Puerto Rico in particular. And like they got horrible side effects. And it was just sort of like, that's fine. Trial kept going. Recently, like within the past 5 years, they've tried to do a study on a male contraceptive pill. And they had the same type of side effects that women get. And they stopped the study and everyone was like, oh no, men are wimps. But it's actually just because we have better ethical practices now to like protect participants, right? So that's a piece of it too. Let's see. Casey says, I think having more freedom in college may contribute to risky sexual practices. Yeah, it's like your first time out of the house, right? I don't know if anyone in here was homeschooled. I know the experiences are vastly different for folks who are homeschooled now. But you know, there was someone I knew who was homeschooled, who like kind of went a little crazy when she got to college with sex, right? And then she's calmed down and she's like married and lots of kids now and whatnot. But like, I was like a little worried about her sexual health for a little bit. So yeah, sometimes like getting out from underneath your parents' thumb. I think also just what we just looked at, right? Education. Unfortunately, even people who get to the college level and who are intelligent as everyone in this room sometimes have not been given the education about contraceptives, condom use, things like that, right? Alrighty. So there's another question here. And maybe we'll just spitball this one because it's less of a like discussion and more of a like throw things out. If you all had to guess, what would you say is the most effective method of protecting against STDs, STIs? They're called the same thing sort of interchangeably. Who would guess the pill? Who would guess condoms? Yeah. Hormonal birth control, while great at preventing pregnancy, does not actually protect in any way, shape, or form against STDs, right? And so you need to use what they call a barrier method, whether that is a male condom, a female condom. Don't use both together. It just creates more friction and they're much more likely to break, right? And then in terms of rattling off names of contraception, not going to make you all do that, but I do have a list here if my slides will load. You can do it, computer. Yay. Okay. So this is honestly not even comprehensive, but this is a list of various forms of birth control. And so again, it's really tiny font, so I'll kind of walk you all through it. But at the top, they have birth control pills, the failure rate. They're calling it the ideal failure rate, which sounds like an oxymoron, right? Like ideal failure, what? But it's if you're using this method the way you're supposed to. So for the pill, you're taking your pill every day around the same time, then the failure rate is less than 1%. But if you are maybe missing pills, right, things along those lines, or if you take an antibiotic while you're on the pill, a lot of people don't know that can actually affect the pill's effectiveness. Even things like echinacea can as well. Then it's got an 8% fail rate. So if you are on any kind of hormonal contraceptive and do have to take something when you're sick, ask your doctor about whether you should use a backup method. It's highly reliable. It does have some health benefits. Like a lot of people will just talk about the pill's health consequences, and it does have some people get weight gain, mood swings, things like that. But you actually have lower chance of getting breast cancer, ovarian cancer, things like that if you're taking the pill. Also, if you have certain conditions like endometriosis or PCOS, the pill is basically the only way to treat them at this point in time. Side effects, you do have to remember to take it every day. Some women do have health risks. If you smoke while you're on any kind of hormonal contraceptive, it does make it more likely you will have vascular issues. So there have been cases of fairly young people having strokes because they smoke while they're on a hormonal contraceptive. And as we just mentioned, it doesn't protect against STDs. There is something called the mini pill that is just progesterone. The normal birth control is estrogen and progesterone. The mini pill is taken for people who essentially their body doesn't work well with the regular pill. You can also take it while you're breastfeeding. Whereas if you take the regular pill while you're breastfeeding, it will like shut down your milk production. However, this is claiming it is as effective. People I know have told me it's not. Like people have literally gotten pregnant on it. So there are injectables and rings you can use. Depo-Provera, I believe, is only every 3 months that you would have to go see your doctor. The NuvaRing and other related rings you insert vaginally and you only have to change it once a month. Subdermal implants are actually becoming more effective, and as you can see, they're one of the most effective things. So only 0.1% failure rate. They'll put a little implant in your arm that slowly releases birth control. And there are also patches. And like the only drawback to those is if you get skin irritation, like from regular band-aids, you probably will from this. Barrier methods, the IUD has become increasingly popular. So if you're not familiar with what this is, it is something that is inserted by a doctor and stays in the uterus, and it basically prevents implantation. Some are just metal, like copper. Some will have like a hormonal coating, so they kind of work like the pill, but also will prevent implantation. The state of Colorado did a really interesting study where they made IUDs freely available to teenage and like young adult folks, and their rate of teen pregnancy went down drastically. Definitely effective. I don't think very many people use diaphragms anymore, but these are something you would insert vaginally. You would often pair it with like a cream or jelly that spermicidal literally means it's going to kill the sperm. And that's really similar to like sponges and cervical caps. Again, a barrier method you stick up there. Sponges always make me kind of giggle, which sounds weird as like a very serious educator. But when I was in high school sex ed, our teacher had us present on different types of contraception. Prevent was a good phrase there, I guess, if we're talking about contraception. And we did like skits about it, and one of my friends was Sponge Man and like made himself a whole superhero costume to talk about sponges. So there you go. We just talked about condoms. Again, they're pretty good if you're using them ideally. If you forget to put it on right away, right? If it breaks, things like that, if it's expired, if someone is sabotaging you and pokes holes in it. I don't know how often that happens in real life. That seems to only really happen in movies, right? But it does have a higher failure rate, as do some of these other things. The rhythm method is something that a lot of people will try to advocate for. And it's people really across the political and religious spectrum. Some people argue religiously this is the only way you should be using birth control. Some people who are very like crunchy yoga-y people, right, will think like this is better for your body. But this is basically you try to chart the woman's cycle and don't have sex on the day she's supposedly fertile, or like that window where she's supposedly ovulating. This is great if people have a regular cycle, but a lot of people with uteruses do not, right? Sometimes it's 20 days, sometimes it's 28 days. So as you can see, it has a decently high failure rate, right? The like most effective methods here, and I think they flipped this here. These are supposed to be like less than 1%, not 99% failure rate. But surgical methods are very, very, very effective. So for those with female reproductive systems, tubal ligation is where it's sound weird. It's what they do when they spay an animal, essentially. They are going to remove part of your fallopian tube. Sometimes they also remove the ova. If anything is going on, like cancer-wise, they'll also remove the whole uterus. That's called a hysterectomy. If you can't ovulate, you can't get pregnant, right? If you don't have a uterus, you can't get pregnant. Pretty darn effective. But it is a really invasive surgery. You're taking out major organs, right? And then in terms of vasectomies for men, these are, again, very effective. It is an outpatient procedure. You just do it in the office, you're awake for it, in and out, and you're done. And then like a couple days of pain and you're good. And what they do here is they sever the vas deferens, which is what takes the sperm to the place it could be ejaculated. So you still produce sperm, it just cannot leave the body. The withdrawal method, which is pulling out before any sort of orgasm happens, not very effective. People aren't necessarily good at this. And then if you're not using any contraception over time, you have about an 85% chance of getting pregnant. And then also really high risk of STD use, right? So those are, again, I don't even think this is exhaustive. There's other stuff coming out all the time. And then this is the fun slide. These are all the STDs or STIs. So we've talked about AIDS. AIDS comes from the HIV virus, the human immunodeficiency virus. As I just mentioned, we have really good treatments for that now. I actually worked in an HIV clinic while I was on my residency year. And as long as you're taking your medications, pretty similar to like taking your birth control, take your medications every day. People who are HIV positive will basically have a zero or like undetectable viral load, which basically means like the virus is in your system, but it's dormant. If you do not treat it, it can develop into AIDS. AIDS is a devastating virus. Wreaks havoc on the whole immune system. You often get like sores all over your body. Your body becomes very emaciated. You develop, like eventually it attacks the brain and you develop cognitive difficulties that look like Alzheimer's disease. And then it kills you, essentially. Or sometimes what was really sketchy when the AIDS epidemic was going on in the 80s is that like, A, some doctors wouldn't treat it because they didn't understand it, which is like totally unethical in my mind. But then B, like they didn't want to admit so many people were dying of AIDS. And so they'd be like, this person died of the flu. And it's like, yeah, they got the flu when they had AIDS and that's why they died, right? So sometimes we don't have good counts. HPV, oh, sorry, chlamydia, I didn't talk about yet. It's bacterial, so it can be treated with antibiotics. I'm not going to read all the not great side effects. You all can research those if you really want to. HPV is one that's gotten, within the past 20 years, a lot of attention because one of the things HPV can do is actually cause cancer, specifically cervical cancer, but also really interestingly, cancer in other places. So for example, what is his name? Martin Sheen developed throat cancer and saw him on a red carpet once and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, glad you're doing better. You know, do you know how you contracted this? And he said, yeah, there's just a lot of cunnilingus in the 70s. So like men can get it in their throats, and women can as well. The beautiful thing now is that there is a vaccine called Gardasil. It's a 3 shot regimen, and it can actually prevent HPV, which means it can prevent cancer. Why this has been in the news still is that it's controversial because some people think if I give my child this, it okays them to go have sex. which I think is like a really weird way of saying I don't want to prevent cancer in my child. I don't know. That's just me. Gonorrhea is another one. Not great, right? Herpes, there are different versions of herpes, and that can be treated in different ways. Pubic lice are just lice, but in your pubic hair, not pleasant. Syphilis is a really interesting one historically. So if you've read Shakespeare, he'll like reference people with syphilis, and it like created madness and baldness. And so like if someone had syphilis, you could tell basically. Trick is a parasite you can get. And then viral hepatitis is another thing that like we have some treatments and vaccines for. Every once in a while you'll see like ads on TV, like, do you have hepatitis B? Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, alrighty. This one, instead of going into groups, again, let's just sort of throw it out to everybody. So there is this inconsistency where we sort of, as we saw on the clip, the news clip, right? We tend to find it awkward, uncomfortable, or we just like avoid talking about sex. And yet there's a lot of sexual activity that might be portrayed in books, movies, video games, right? If we think about the porn industry, multi-billion-dollar industry, right? So what do you think, like, why can't we talk about it when we see it so often? Why is there this sort of weird dichotomy? And again, there's no right or wrong answer, just sort of like off the top of your mind. What do y'all think? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it, right? So in real life, you're like worried about how other people are going to judge you. Yeah. Other thoughts about this? And again, folks on Zoom, please feel free to add stuff in the chat.
People aren't like really mentally mature to have a conversation, especially if like something they're not used to.
That's really true, right? Yeah. So like we as social creatures, humans, right? We learn from people around us, right? And so if other people around us are not having those conversations, we don't know how to have those conversations, right? I think that's a big piece of it. This always makes me kind of think back historically, and because this is something that like seems to be particularly like obvious in the US. And like one of the things my high school history teacher like talked about, and it still sticks with me, is the fact that America was sort of like dually founded by settlers. We want to fully acknowledge indigenous people were here for thousands of years before that, right? So we weren't the first people to come here. But here in Virginia, right, we had the Virginia Company, and they were coming and looking for gold because Cortez had found gold in South America, so there must just be gold everywhere, right? They were here for capitalistic purposes. They were here to make money, right? And so they were here to kind of exploit the land. And then up in Massachusetts, you had the Puritans, who we kind of think about them as like escaping for reasons of religious freedom because they didn't want to be part of the Church of England. Again, when you sort of learn more about them, they kind of wanted the freedom to like make everybody be their religion instead. I know, I guess that's a lot of religions. And so you have this like literally puritanical stance, right? That like sex is not okay, we don't talk about it. And so I think there's still threads of that, right, in modern culture, where we do have sort of this capitalistic, we think sex sells, so we're going to throw it in everything, right? Versus, yeah, this religious puritanical element or just moral elements, right? Where people think it's not okay to talk about sex. Alrighty, so that is actually it for this lecture. Thank you all so much for engaging. I know that, again, as this question asks, it can be really awkward to talk about these subjects. So well, I will let y'all go. And then on Friday, we are going to start talking about, I believe, theories of personality. Yep, so that's fun.